Michael Brennan tightened his grip on the steering wheel, the old Ford pickup groaning as it pushed through the biting wind. Snow whipped against the windshield in furious bursts, each gust rattling his nerves. He hated Christmas Eve. Every blinking light strung across Main Street reminded him of everything he had lost. 3 years had passed since the accident that took Catherine and little Sophie, and yet the silence inside his house still felt raw, like a wound that refused to heal. Some years he tried pretending, stringing one lonely wreath on the front porch because his neighbor insisted. Other years, like this one, he fled, driving the back roads, letting the empty miles swallow the grief. Tonight the storm was merciless, coating the world in white. The tires hummed over ice-slick asphalt, his headlights cutting through the swirling curtain. Michael wasn't sure what he was chasing or running from, but then he saw them. At first he thought the storm was playing tricks on his tired eyes. Just two faint shapes huddled together on the shoulder of Route 47. His chest tightened, instincts firing. He braked hard, the truck skidding before finding traction again. The hazard lights blinked red against the dark pines as Michael grabbed his flashlight and jumped out into the storm. The beam caught on two children. A little boy, maybe 5, stood with his arms locked tightly around a much smaller girl, her face buried in his coat, their boots barely visible beneath snow that had already crept up to their ankles. Both wore thin jackets, the kind you'd grab for fall weather, not for a night like this. Michael's breath caught. He crouched low, flashlight steady, voice gentle. "Hey there, buddy," he said, fighting the wind. "You okay? Where are your parents?" The boy blinked up at him, wide-eyed and trembling. His lips were tinged blue, but his chin jutted forward, stubborn, brave. "She said to wait here," he muttered, voice barely audible over the storm. "She? Who's she?" Michael asked carefully. Our aunt. She told us to stay here. Said somebody would come." His grip on the little girl tightened. She whimpered softly, clutching his sleeve. Michael's stomach dropped. There was no car nearby, no tire tracks, no sign of anyone else for miles. Just two fragile kids left alone in a blizzard. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. The boy hesitated, then whispered, "Since the sun was up." Michael checked his watch. 7:14 p.m. That meant these kids had been abandoned for nearly 10 hours. His hands shook, anger rushing hot through his veins. He forced his voice steady. "What's your name, son?" "Daniel," the boy said, shoulders squared like he was trying to be a man. He pointed to the girl. "This is Lily. She's 3. She's cold." Michael's throat tightened. He pulled off his gloves, reached slowly, and touched the girl's tiny hand. Ice cold. Her eyes fluttered open, big and frightened. She whispered one heartbreaking word. "Hungry." He swallowed hard. "Okay, Daniel. Okay, Lily. My name's Michael. I'm gonna help you." He pulled out his phone, but, of course, no signal. The storm had killed the nearest tower. He crouched lower, showing them his lock screen, a faded photo of him in his sheriff's deputy uniform. "See this? I used to be a police officer. That means keeping kids safe is my job. You can trust me." Daniel studied him with serious eyes far older than his years. Slowly he nodded. Michael scooped Lily into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, frighteningly light, while guiding Daniel toward the truck. Once inside, he cranked the heat, wrapped them both in his emergency blanket, and poured hot chocolate from his thermos into the cup lid. "Careful, it's warm," he said, handing it to Daniel. The boy shared it with Lily, steady hands despite his shivering. Watching them, Michael's chest ached. Memories of Sophie, her giggle, her sticky fingers after hot cocoa, rose unbidden. He blinked hard, focusing on the present. "Daniel," he asked softly, "what's your aunt's name?" The boy's jaw tightened. "Carol, but she's not really our aunt. She just made us call her that." Michael clenched his teeth. He'd seen plenty of ugly things in law enforcement, but nothing boiled his blood like cruelty toward kids. As the storm raged outside, Daniel told him everything in bits and pieces. Their mother, Angela, had died suddenly from a brain aneurysm 6 months earlier. Their father had signed away his rights years ago. Since then, they'd been shuffled from one foster home to another. Carol was supposed to care for them, but she didn't. "She said we eat too much," Daniel muttered, pulling Lily closer. "Said we're too loud, even when we're quiet." Michael's grip on the steering wheel tightened until his knuckles turned white. He glanced at Lily, small and fragile against her brother's chest. No child should ever believe their Too much for the world. You listen to me, Daniel, Michael said firmly, his voice carrying the weight of his grief and his promise. You and your sister are not too much. You are not a burden. What happened tonight, it's not your fault. Understand? The boy met his eyes. For a second, Michael swore he saw hope flicker there, fragile but real. He drove them toward Millbrook, snow crunching under his tires. The police station would know what to do. But as he stole a glance at Daniel and Lily, huddled together under the blanket, sharing the last drops of hot chocolate, something inside Michael cracked open. 3 years he had lived like a ghost, drifting through empty halls and cold nights. And now, on this frozen Christmas Eve, 2 abandoned children had landed in his path. Maybe by chance, maybe by something greater. Either way, he knew one thing. This night wasn't just about saving them. It was about saving himself. The heater rattled inside the old Ford, pumping out blessed heat as Michael pushed through the storm. Daniel sat stiffly in the passenger seat, holding Lily close beneath the emergency blanket. The boy's jaw was set like a soldier's, but his small hands trembled as they clutched the thermos lid. Lily's eyelids fluttered, half asleep, her cheek pressed against her brother's chest. Michael kept glancing at them, one hand steady on the wheel, the other clenching with helpless anger. Abandoning children in the freezing dark, it wasn't just wrong, it was criminal. Yet what struck him even harder was the way Daniel carried himself. That rigid, protective posture, the weight of responsibility pressing down on a 5-year-old's shoulders. You're doing good, Daniel, Michael said softly, trying not to spook him. Keeping your sister warm, keeping her safe, that's brave. The boy's eyes flicked toward him, cautious, measuring. Then he whispered, I promised Mom I'd always take care of her. The words hit Michael like a blow. He swallowed, staring into the blizzard's blur. This wasn't just survival. This boy was holding up the last vow he'd ever made to his mother. The road curved, icy and slick. Michael slowed, his headlights catching on a familiar sign. Millbrook Police Department. 2 miles. Relief washed over him. At least there would be more hands to help. Inside the station, the warmth was immediate. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the desks and bulletin boards. Deputy Janet Walker looked up from her paperwork, surprise flashing across her face. Michael, she asked, rising, what on earth are you doing out in this weather? Then her eyes fell on the bundle in his arms. Lily, half asleep, clinging to his coat. Behind him, Daniel stood rigid, gripping the hem of Michael's jacket. Janet's expression shifted instantly from casual surprise to sharp concern. Who are these little ones? Michael's voice was clipped, steady, the way it had been in his deputy days. Found them on Route 47, alone. Been out there since morning. Janet's hand flew to her mouth. She crouched down to Daniel's level. Sweetheart, what's your name? Daniel hesitated, eyes darting back to Michael for reassurance. Michael gave a small nod. I'm Daniel, the boy said firmly. This is my sister, Lily. She's 3. Janet's gaze softened. Well, hi, Daniel. Hi, Lily. You're safe now. But Michael noticed the way Daniel didn't relax. His small hand still clung to Michael's coat like an anchor. Trust didn't come easy, not after what they'd been through. Janet straightened, lowering her voice as she pulled Michael aside. The storms knocked out half the county. Emergency foster homes are already full. The only open beds tonight are at the shelter. Michael pictured the shelter, overcrowded, chaotic, noisy with adults battling demons of their own. A terrifying place for 2 already traumatized kids. He looked back through the glass at Daniel, who was helping Lily sip from the last of the cocoa. The boy's shoulders were hunched, protective, like he expected the world to rip his sister away at any second. Michael's chest tightened. He couldn't do it. He couldn't let those kids be tossed into another nightmare. They can't go there, he said, voice hard. Not tonight. Janet frowned. Then where? Michael hesitated. The words came before he could second-guess them. With me? Janet blinked. Michael, are you sure? It's Christmas Eve. This is a lot. I still have my foster certification, he said quickly. Kept it current. Never used it after Sophie was born, but it's valid. He exhaled, fighting the tremor in his voice. They need somewhere safe, somewhere warm. I can give them that. Janet studied him, her eyes softening with something like respect. All right, I'll fast-track the paperwork. Just be sure you're ready. Michael wasn't sure of anything. But as he returned to the kids, he knew one truth. Leaving them to face the shelter alone was unthinkable. Come on, you two, he said gently. You're coming home with me tonight. The drive back felt surreal. Daniel stayed awake this time, eyes fixed on the passing snow. Lily dozed, safe in her brother's lap. When Michael turned onto his street, the porch lights of his neighbors glowed faintly through the storm. His own house loomed ahead, a two-story colonial that had been silent too long. As he carried Lily inside and guided Daniel through the doorway, the smell of pine greeted them. The artificial Christmas tree still stood in the corner of the living room, half-heartedly decorated with mismatched ornaments. His neighbor had insisted he put it up. Now for the first time, he was glad he had. "This your house?" Daniel asked, eyes scanning the framed photos still lining the hallway. His voice carried both awe and suspicion. "Yeah," Michael said softly. "It's not much, but it's home." Daniel's gaze landed on one photo in particular, a smiling little girl with pigtails holding up a crayon drawing. Sophie. His chest constricted. "Who's she?" Daniel asked. Michael's throat tightened. That was my daughter. She's not here anymore." The boy's serious eyes lingered on the photo. He didn't pry, didn't ask, just nodded, like he somehow understood loss all too well. Michael led them upstairs. His hand hovered on a doorknob he hadn't touched in years. Sophie's room. The walls were still painted a cheerful pink, the bed neatly made, her teddy bear sitting on the pillow. A shrine frozen in time. He hesitated, heart pounding. But when he looked back at Daniel and Lily, two children with no bed, no safe place, he knew. Sophie would want this. "This will be your room," he said quietly. "Both of you." Daniel stepped inside first, cautious. Lily toddled in behind him, her eyes wide at the sight of stuffed animals and books. She grabbed the teddy bear and hugged it tight, her first smile breaking through the exhaustion. "Do you like it?" Michael asked. "It's pretty," Daniel said, voice hushed. "Like a storybook." Michael swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "Yeah, like a storybook." Later that night, after grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, meager but warm, Michael tucked them into bed. Daniel insisted on sleeping on the edge, closest to the door, as though he were standing guard. Lily curled against him, still clutching the teddy bear. Michael lingered in the doorway, the weight of the past pressing heavy on his shoulders. For 3 years, this house had been nothing but echoes and shadows. Now, in one night, it was different. The silence was broken. The rooms were alive again. As he turned off the light, Daniel's small voice stopped him. "Mr. Michael?" "Yeah, buddy? You're not going to leave us too, right?" Michael's chest cracked wide open. He crossed the room, knelt beside the bed, and met the boy's fearful eyes. "No, Daniel," he said firmly, voice low and steady. "I won't leave you. Not tonight. Not ever." Daniel studied him for a long moment. Then slowly his rigid shoulders loosened. His eyes closed, his hand reaching for Lily's, locking their fingers together before sleep finally claimed him. Michael sat there long after, listening to their breathing, watching over them like a sentinel. His heart ached, but for the first time in years, the ache was joined by something else. Something small, something stubborn. Hope. The house had not felt this alive in years. The faint hum of the heater, the rustle of blanket-covered bodies upstairs, the low sigh of wind against the windows, sounds Michael once considered ordinary, now felt profound. He sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, hands wrapped around a chipped coffee mug, staring at the glow of the Christmas tree. For 3 years, that tree had stood as a hollow symbol, dragged from the attic more out of obligation than hope. Tonight, though, it looked different. Maybe it was the sight of Lily clutching Sophie's teddy bear. Maybe it was Daniel's cautious but steady trust when he whispered, "You're not going to leave us too, right?" Either way, Michael felt something shift inside his chest. At 3 in the morning, a cry broke the silence. He bolted upright, instinct snapping to attention. Racing upstairs, he pushed open Sophie's door. Daniel was sitting up, holding Lily close, his small shoulders tight with tension. The little girl's cheeks were wet with tears. "What happened?" Michael whispered, crouching by the bed. "She dreamed we were back there," Daniel said, his voice low but steady. "On the road, waiting. Nobody came." Lily sobbed into her brother's shirt, hiccuping. "We were bad. That's why nobody wanted us." Michael's gut twisted. He sat on the edge of the bed, pulling both children gently against him, his arms wrapped around them with a strength born of years of absence. "Listen to me," he said firmly, voice breaking just enough to betray the depth of his emotion. "You are not bad. You're kids. Beautiful, brave, Good kids. What happened to you is not your fault. Adults failed you. That's on them, not you. Daniel blinked hard, as though trying to process words he had never been told before. Lily's sobs softened, her tiny hands clutching Michael's sleeve like an anchor. He stayed there until they drifted back into restless sleep. And even then, he didn't leave. He sat in the chair by the window, watching over them, keeping vigil like he wished someone had done for Sophie that fateful night. Morning came softly, filtered sunlight breaking through the curtains. Michael expected them to wake slowly, wary, but instead he found them whispering by the Christmas tree, staring at the wrapped boxes he had placed beneath it the night before. "Santa found us," Lily whispered, wonder lighting her eyes. Daniel frowned, cautious even in joy. "Maybe they're not for us." Michael stepped into the room. "You know, Santa's clever," he said, his voice carrying a rare smile. "Sometimes he leaves extra gifts in case he finds kids who need them." The children exchanged a glance, then looked at the boxes again. When Michael nodded, they tore into the wrapping paper with a hunger that wasn't just about toys. It was about belonging. Inside were the gifts Michael had once bought for Sophie. Books, crayons, a doll with golden hair, a small science kit. For years they had gathered dust in the garage, frozen in time. Now they breathed again in the hands of children who needed them. Lily squealed with delight at the doll, hugging it close, declaring, "She can be my sister too." Daniel flipped through the books with solemn excitement, pausing at one filled with bright illustrations of space. Michael excused himself to the kitchen, his throat too tight. He pressed his palms against the counter, eyes stinging. This wasn't how he planned it. He never wanted those presents touched by anyone but Sophie. But watching Daniel and Lily, seeing life return to the gifts he had hidden away, felt like the closest thing to healing he had known. By noon, Deputy Janet arrived with bags of donated clothes and supplies. She took Michael aside, her expression grim. "We found Carol Hutchins," she said. "She admitted to abandoning them, claimed they ran away, but she was planning it for weeks. She just didn't want them anymore." Michael's jaw clenched, fury burning hot beneath his skin. "She got paid to care for them." Janet nodded. "Checks she kept cashing while neglecting them. CPS will file charges." "But Michael, these kids have no one else. Their mother had no living relatives. Their father signed away his rights. The system will take them back." "But," her voice trailed off, heavy with implication, "siblings don't always get placed together." Michael glanced through the doorway at Daniel and Lily, sitting cross-legged on the rug, playing with crayons. Daniel was carefully helping Lily choose colors, patient in a way no 5-year-old should have to be. She giggled softly, the sound small but real. "They're not being separated," Michael said flatly. "Michael?" "No." His voice was steel. "I lost one child. I'm not watching 2 more get torn apart." Janet studied him, eyes softened by compassion. "Then you know what that means. It's not just tonight. It's a lifetime." Michael exhaled slowly, the truth pressing on his chest like a weight. But when he looked back at the kids, he felt resolve, not doubt. "I know," he said. That evening after Janet left, Michael cooked dinner. Real food this time, not just sandwiches. He pulled ingredients he hadn't used in months from the fridge: pasta, ground beef, tomatoes, and made spaghetti. The rich smell filled the kitchen, clashing with the old silence that used to reign there. Daniel ate hungrily but neatly, thanking Michael after every bite. Lily smeared sauce across her cheeks, giggling. For the first time in years, the kitchen table looked like a family meal. Later, while washing dishes, Michael noticed Daniel lingering by the fridge. The boy stared at Sophie's old drawings still taped there, colorful scribbles of flowers and stick figures. "Did she draw these?" Daniel asked quietly. Michael dried his hands on a towel. "Yeah, she loved drawing." He paused, then added softly, "She would have liked you." Daniel nodded slowly, his small face unreadable. But later, when Lily fell asleep on the couch, Michael noticed Daniel carefully smoothing out the wrapping paper from their gifts, folding it neatly into a pile. "We can use it again," he said simply, "for when we have something to give back." Michael's throat tightened. That kind of hope, that assumption of a future, was more precious than gold. That night, as Michael tucked them into Sophie's room again, Daniel looked up at him. His eyes, serious and old, searched Michael's face. "Mr. Michael?" he asked. "Yeah, buddy? If they make us go somewhere else, If they split us up, would you fight for us? The question pierced deep, sharp as glass. Michael bent down, resting a hand on Daniel's shoulder. I'd fight with everything I've got, he said, I promise. For the first time since meeting him, Daniel's face cracked into something more than caution. It wasn't a smile exactly, but it was lighter, freer. And in that fragile, fleeting moment, Michael realized something startling. This wasn't just about helping them survive a storm. It was about building something bigger than the three of them had ever expected. A family. The house was quiet again, but it was no longer the hollow silence that had haunted Michael for years. Instead, it was layered now, with the soft breathing of two children asleep upstairs, the faint hum of the heater, the occasional creak of floorboards under the winter cold. Michael sat in his recliner, staring at the muted television without hearing a word. His thoughts were on Daniel and Lily. Just 24 hours earlier, he hadn't known they existed. Now he couldn't imagine leaving them to the chaos of the system. He replayed Daniel's serious little face, his question still echoing. Would you fight for us? Michael had answered instinctively. I'd fight with everything I've got. But now in the heavy silence of the night, the weight of that promise pressed hard against his chest. The next morning, Michael was woken not by his alarm, but by laughter. Light, bubbling, innocent laughter. He sat up slowly, almost disoriented. The sound hadn't filled this house since Sophie's last morning. Padding down the hall, he peeked into Sophie's room. Lily sat cross-legged on the bed, Sophie's old teddy bear tucked under her arm, while Daniel held up a picture book and did his best to read the words aloud. He stumbled over the bigger ones, but Lily didn't care. She giggled each time he made a funny face, her tiny hands clapping. Michael leaned against the doorframe, unseen, and felt something stir inside him. Not just grief, not just duty, something warmer. Hope. Later that day, Janet returned with paperwork and an apologetic look. CPS is reviewing their case after the holiday, she said. Michael, they'll want to move the kids to an official foster placement. You know how this goes. Michael bristled. And split them up? Janet sighed. There aren't many families who'll take siblings, especially when one is still practically a baby. Michael's jaw tightened. He could almost hear Lily's whimper in the night, her small voice whispering, We were bad. That's why nobody wanted us. He thought of Daniel's steady arms around her, the way the boy stood guard like a soldier, far too young for war. No, Michael said flatly, not happening. Janet studied him carefully. You're already attached. They deserve better than being tossed around like packages, he snapped. Then his voice softened. Janet, I know what it feels like to lose your family. I can't let them go through that again. She nodded slowly, scribbling something on her clipboard. If you're serious, you'll need to prove stability. The house, your job, counseling records. You know the drill. Michael swallowed hard. It wasn't just an emotional decision. It was paperwork, home studies, background checks, all the red tape he once thought meaningless. But now it felt like the only fight that mattered. That evening, he took the kids grocery shopping. It had been years since he'd pushed a cart with purpose. Daniel insisted on walking beside him, small hands clutching the side of the cart like a soldier at attention, while Lily rode in the seat, kicking her boots happily. Can we get cereal? Daniel asked cautiously, pointing at the bright boxes. Of course, Michael said, tossing one in. He saw the way Daniel's eyes lit up, like he hadn't expected a yes. They picked out macaroni, apples, milk, simple things, but to the kids it was like stocking a kingdom. At the checkout, Lily babbled to the cashier about her new teddy bear, while Daniel tried to hand over a crumpled dollar bill he'd kept in his pocket. You keep that, Michael said gently. You might need it for something special. Daniel looked confused, then tucked the bill away, his little shoulders relaxing. On the drive home, snow still fell lightly, but the mood inside the truck was warm. Lily sang softly to herself. Daniel stared out the window, thoughtful. Mr. Michael, he said suddenly, if we stay here, would we have to call you something different? Michael's throat tightened. He wasn't ready for that question. Not yet. You can call me whatever feels right, he answered softly. Daniel nodded, satisfied for now. That night, after spaghetti and a board game Michael dug out of the closet, the three of them sat by the tree. Lily's head rested on Michael's lap as she drifted off, while Daniel leaned against his arm, eyes heavy but determined to stay awake. Michael looked down at them, two children who had already burrowed their way into the cracks of his broken heart. For years, he had lived surrounded by ghosts. Now, for the first time, he felt alive again. But with that, life came fear. Fear of losing them to a system that didn't care about promises whispered in the dark. He brushed a strand of hair from Lily's face and whispered, almost to himself, "You're not going anywhere. Not if I can help it." The days that followed were a blur of small miracles. Daniel's cautious questions at the dinner table. Lily's messy drawings taped proudly beside Sophie's old ones on the fridge. The sound of 2 pairs of feet racing down the hall. Each night, Michael sat in Sophie's old chair, reading aloud until Lily's eyes fluttered closed and Daniel stubbornly stayed open a few minutes longer. Each morning he found them curled together like kittens, their small hands intertwined, as if afraid separation could come even in sleep. And every time he saw them like that, Michael's resolve hardened. He wasn't just their temporary guardian, he was their protector, their father in every way that mattered. On New Year's Eve, they watched the ball drop on television. Lily clapped and squealed, though she didn't understand what it meant. Daniel leaned closer, his voice soft. Are we going to have to leave after this?" Michael turned to him, heart aching. He had spent the week wrestling with the answer, but tonight it was clear. "No," he said firmly, his voice strong with conviction. "Not if you don't want to. You're not leaving. Not ever." Daniel blinked, stunned. Then slowly he nodded. For the first time, a real smile broke across his face, shy, uncertain, but radiant. Lily, half asleep, whispered, "Daddy." Michael froze. The word hung in the air, fragile and miraculous. He hadn't heard it in 3 years, not since Sophie. Tears burned his eyes, but he didn't correct her. Instead, he pulled them both into his arms, his voice trembling as he whispered, "Yes, sweetheart, I'm here." That night, as fireworks cracked faintly in the distance, Michael lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He knew the road ahead would be hard, CPS, paperwork, court hearings. But he also knew this. For the first time since Catherine and Sophie died, he had something worth fighting for. 2 children who needed him just as much as he needed them, and he would not let go. For years, Michael's house had felt like a museum of grief. The rooms were dusted, the curtains washed, the fridge stocked, but it all existed in silence, as if life had been drained from the walls. Now, just days after Christmas, everything had changed. The sound of Lily's giggles echoed down the hallway. Daniel's steady little voice, serious but careful, followed close behind as he tried to teach her the alphabet using Sophie's old flashcards. The house, once suffocating in its quiet, now pulsed with energy. Michael stood in the kitchen brewing coffee, listening. It struck him how quickly the children had carved out space here, how naturally they belonged. It wasn't seamless. Lily sometimes woke crying in the night. Daniel sometimes stiffened at sudden noises. But it was real. It was life. That morning, Michael drove them into town for errands. Daniel sat tall in the booster seat Michael had dug out from his garage, scanning the world like a sentry. Lily hummed tunelessly, kicking her boots against the seat. At the grocery store, Michael let them each pick one special item. Lily pointed to a bag of marshmallows almost bigger than she was. Daniel paused in front of the cereal aisle, fingers grazing a box of Frosted Flakes. "You like those?" Michael asked. Daniel shrugged as if afraid to want too much. "We had them once, before." Michael tossed 2 boxes in the cart. Daniel blinked, startled. "That's too many," he said quickly. "No," Michael replied, smiling gently. "It's exactly enough." By the time they reached checkout, Lily had charmed the cashier with her chatter about Santa's presents. Daniel clutched the receipt like it was gold. On the way home, Michael caught the boy staring at the bags of groceries with something close to wonder. It wasn't about cereal or marshmallows. It was about security, about knowing there would be food tomorrow, and the next day, and the one after that. Back home, they unpacked groceries together. Lily darted around like a whirlwind, placing apples in the wrong drawer and laughing at her own mistakes. Daniel, ever serious, lined up the canned goods neatly on the shelf. "You're a big help," Michael told him. Daniel looked up, startled at the praise. His small chest puffed just slightly. Later, Michael cooked dinner, roast chicken with mashed potatoes, a meal he hadn't bothered making in years. The kids sat at the table, coloring with Sophie's old crayons while he worked. Every few minutes, Lily would hold up a scribble for approval, and Michael would feign deep analysis before pronouncing it a masterpiece. Daniel rolled his eyes but smiled when he thought no one was looking. Dinner was messy, loud, imperfect. Lily dropped her fork 3 times. Daniel asked serious questions about whether mashed potatoes were healthy carbs. Michael laughed more than he had in 3 years. Afterward, they cleared the table together. Daniel insisted on drying dishes while Michael washed. Lily sang nonsense songs into a wooden spoon. The kitchen, once a place of hollow meals and silence, glowed with something vibrant again. That night, Michael tucked them into Sophie's room. Lily clung to her teddy bear, already half asleep. Daniel lingered, his small brow furrowed. "Mr. Michael?" he asked. "Yeah, buddy? When CPS comes, do we have to go?" The question tore at Michael's heart. He knelt, meeting Daniel's worried eyes. "No one's taking you away without a fight," he said firmly. "I meant what I told you. I'll fight for you and your sister with everything I've got." Daniel searched his face, then gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. He climbed into bed, pulling Lily close. Within minutes, both were asleep, their small hands intertwined. Michael sat for a long time in the chair by the window watching. A part of him still feared waking up to find the house empty again, as if this had all been a dream. But as he listened to the rhythm of their breathing, he knew it was real. The following afternoon, a neighbor stopped by. Mrs. Henderson, an older woman who had known Catherine since childhood, stood on the porch holding a plate of cookies. "I heard you had little visitors," she said warmly. Her eyes softened when she spotted Lily's face peeking from behind Michael's leg. Michael hesitated, unused to explaining. But Lily solved that by darting forward, announcing proudly, "We live here now." Daniel, ever cautious, hung back, watching. Mrs. Henderson smiled, pressing the plate into Michael's hands. "Well, it's about time this house had children in it again. Catherine would be glad." The words hit deep, but not painfully. For the first time, Michael didn't flinch at hearing his wife's name. Instead, he felt gratitude. Catherine would be glad. As the days rolled on, routines formed. Breakfast with cereal and fruit, afternoon walks bundled in coats too big but warm, bedtime stories read from Sophie's favorite books. Daniel thrived under structure. He wanted to help with chores, asked questions about everything, soaked up Michael's quiet praise like sunlight. Lily blossomed in laughter, delighting in silly songs and tickle fights. But there were shadows too. Nightmares still came. Daniel sometimes froze when strangers spoke to him, his small hand gripping Michael's sleeve in silent fear. Lily occasionally whispered, "We were bad," as if testing whether the lie still held power. Each time, Michael countered firmly, "You're good, you're wanted, you're loved." Slowly, those words began to sink in. One night, after tucking them in, Michael lingered downstairs, staring at Sophie's old drawings on the fridge. He thought about the upcoming CPS visit, the endless paperwork, the interviews. Doubt gnawed at him. Could he really do this? Could he be enough for two children who had already lost so much? But then he remembered Daniel's hopeful eyes, Lily's whispered "Daddy," the way laughter now echoed in these halls. The truth was simple. He couldn't lose them. Not now. He whispered into the quiet kitchen as if Catherine could hear. "I'm not just keeping a promise to them. I'm keeping one to you, too, to never stop being a father." The next morning, Michael woke to find Daniel already dressed, carefully folding his blanket. The boy looked up, solemn. "Can I help make breakfast?" he asked. Michael smiled. "Yeah, buddy, you can." And as Daniel cracked eggs clumsily into the pan, while Lily danced barefoot in the kitchen, Michael realized the house wasn't just alive again. It was healing. The first week of January slipped into the second, and for the first time in years, Michael found himself noticing the days again. Winter mornings weren't just cold anymore. They carried the warmth of Lily's sleepy giggles at the breakfast table and Daniel's earnest questions about everything from planets to why toast always seemed to burn on one side. The house had rhythm, routine, even joy. But beneath that fragile new normal, Michael felt the tension building like storm clouds on the horizon. The CPS visit loomed. Every time he looked at the kids, Daniel carefully tying his sister's boots before a walk, or Lily proudly showing off a crooked drawing she taped beside Sophie's old ones, he thought about the possibility of losing them, and the thought gutted him. On the morning of the visit, Michael rose early. He scrubbed the kitchen counters, vacuumed the living room, even straightened the photos on the hallway wall. He hadn't fussed over this house in years, but now every detail felt like a test. When the knock came, sharp and businesslike, his chest tightened. Daniel stiffened instantly, his small hand clutching Michael's sleeve. Lily peered from behind her brother, thumb pressed to her lips. Michael opened the door to find a woman in a gray coat holding a clipboard. Her smile was polite, professional, and just a little weary. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Karen Douglas with Child Protective Services." Michael nodded, stepping aside. "Come in." Karen's eyes swept the entryway, landing briefly on Daniel and Lily. She crouched slightly, offering a gentle smile. "You must be Daniel and Lily. I've heard you've been very brave." Daniel's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but he gave a stiff nod. Lily hid her face against Michael's leg. "Would it be okay if I talked with you for a while?" Karen asked softly. Daniel's grip on Michael tightened. Michael crouched down, meeting his eyes. "It's okay, buddy. I'll be right here." After a long pause, Daniel nodded again. Karen toured the house, asking questions in that calm, methodical tone that made Michael feel like he was under a microscope. Did he work full-time? How stable was his income? Did he have support systems? What about his own grief? Was he emotionally ready? Each question landed like a small hammer blow. He answered steadily, but inside doubt gnawed. Was he enough? Could he prove it? When they reached Sophie's room, Karen paused. The walls were still painted pink, but now Lily's drawings and Daniel's carefully folded paper airplanes joined Sophie's art on the bulletin board. "This was your daughter's room?" Karen asked gently. Michael's throat tightened. "Yes, she died 3 years ago, but I thought she'd want it filled with life again." Karen studied him for a long moment, then nodded. After the tour, Karen sat with Daniel and Lily at the kitchen table. She asked simple questions about their favorite food, what they liked to do, whether they felt safe. Lily answered with the unfiltered honesty of a 3-year-old. "Mr. Michael makes spaghetti, and he reads the Bear Book, and he lets me sleep with Teddy." Daniel was quieter, cautious. Finally, he said, "He doesn't yell. He makes us breakfast every day. He says we're not bad." Michael's chest ached. Karen scribbled notes, her face unreadable. When she left, she shook Michael's hand. "We'll be in touch. There's a process. Paperwork, background checks, evaluations. It takes time, but you've given them stability. That matters." As the door closed, Michael exhaled shakily. Stability. He clung to that word like a lifeline. That night, after the kids were asleep, Michael sat in the darkened living room. The Christmas tree was still up, though its needles had begun to fall, carpeting the floor with brittle reminders that holidays were over. He stared at the blinking lights, his mind replaying every question Karen had asked. Could he really do this alone? Be father, provider, protector, healer? His hand drifted to the photo of Catherine and Sophie on the mantel. Catherine's smile was radiant, Sophie's eyes sparkling with mischief. "I don't know if I'm enough," he whispered, "but I can't let them go. Not now." Over the next days, Michael threw himself into proving he could. He took the kids shopping for new clothes with money he hadn't touched in years. He packed lunches with handwritten notes, something Catherine used to do for Sophie. He even called his old grief counselor, scheduling sessions to show CPS he was taking his own healing seriously. It wasn't easy. Some nights Daniel woke screaming, convinced Lily had vanished. Some mornings Lily clung to him, refusing to let him leave for errands. Michael juggled exhaustion with determination, learning the rhythms of fatherhood all over again. One evening, after tucking them in, he found Daniel sitting up, eyes wide in the dark. "What is it, buddy?" Michael asked. Daniel hesitated, then whispered, "What if she doesn't think we belong here?" Michael sat on the edge of the bed, his heart heavy. "You do belong here," he said firmly. "This is your home. No one can take away what we've built together." Daniel's small hand reached for his. "Promise?" Michael squeezed back. "Promise." The first real snowstorm of January hit hard. They spent the day inside, baking cookies that turned out lopsided, building a fort of blankets in the living room, watching cartoons while the wind howled outside. Lily fell asleep curled on Michael's chest, her little hand resting over his heart. Daniel sat beside him, solemn but relaxed, leaning just enough to remind Michael he trusted him. And in that moment, fort, cookies, storm raging outside, Michael realized something profound. It wasn't just about saving them from the cold night on Route 47. It was about giving them a future. That Sunday, they went to church for the first time since Catherine's funeral. Michael wasn't sure why, maybe to prove to CPS, maybe to prove to himself. But when he walked through the doors with Daniel gripping one hand and Lily skipping at his side, something inside eased. Neighbors whispered, surprised to see him again. The pastor smiled warmly. And when Lily shouted during a hymn, "That's my daddy," Michael felt his throat close with emotion. He hadn't expected that word again. Not from anyone but Sophie. But hearing it from Lily, raw and unfiltered, felt like grace. That night, long after the kids were asleep, Michael stood at the window watching snowfall. The house behind him was messy now, colored pencils scattered across the table, stuffed animals piled in corners, tiny socks lost in the laundry. But it was alive, breathing, healing, and so was he. The days after the CPS visit moved with an anxious rhythm. Michael went through the motions, making lunches, checking homework from Daniel's kindergarten workbook, tucking Lily into bed with her bear. But in the back of his mind, he couldn't shake the thought, what if the system decided otherwise? Every knock at the door made him tense. Every phone call raised his pulse. The thought of Daniel and Lily being separated, shuffled to strangers, clawed at him worse than any grief he'd endured. But the kids were blooming. On a Tuesday afternoon, Michael picked them up from the community center. Daniel had been enrolled in a small reading program, and Lily tagged along in the playgroup. When they burst through the door of the house, cheeks flushed from the cold, Michael saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Light. Daniel waved a book triumphantly. I read a whole page by myself. Michael grinned, clapping him on the shoulder. That's amazing, buddy. Lily twirled in her too big coat, hair flying, and declared, I painted a sun for our fridge. Their joy filled the entryway, chasing away the quiet shadows that had once ruled the house. That evening, Michael stood at the stove, stirring chili while the kids argued about how many marshmallows should go in hot cocoa. He listened, smiling, to the normalcy of it all, the sibling banter, the clatter of spoons, Lily's high-pitched giggle. This wasn't just survival anymore, it was family. But the peace cracked one Friday when Karen Douglas from CPS called. Her voice was calm, professional, but her words sent Michael's chest tight. There's a review meeting next week. The board will discuss long-term placement. I'll be honest, Michael. There's concern about whether you're ready to take on 2 young children, given your history of loss. He gripped the phone, jaw tight. They're safe here. They're thriving. I see that, Karen said gently, but we have procedures. I'll be visiting again before the meeting. It matters how stable things look. Stable. The word hung heavy. Stability wasn't something Michael had felt in years, not since before the accident. But for Daniel and Lily, he would find a way. That night, as snow fell quietly outside, Michael read Goodnight Moon to Lily while Daniel sat close, pretending not to listen, but hanging on every word. Afterward, Daniel lingered as Michael tucked in his sister. Are they gonna take us away? The boy whispered. Michael froze, then crouched down so his eyes met Daniel's. The boy's gaze was too old, too serious for 5 years. No, Michael said firmly. Not if I can help it. You belong here. Daniel's lips trembled, but he nodded. Okay. Michael stayed by their bedside until they drifted into sleep, whispering promises into the quiet. You're not leaving. Not ever. Saturday morning brought a rare burst of sunlight. Michael bundled them in coats and boots and took them to the park. The air was crisp, the snow glittering under the pale sun. Lily squealed as she made snow angels, arms and legs flapping wildly. Daniel tried to build a fort, his small hands red but determined. Michael joined in, piling snow beside Daniel, guiding him gently. See? Pack it tight. Strong walls don't fall easy. Daniel grinned, pride flickering across his face. For a moment, Michael saw not a boy burdened by responsibility, but a kid, laughing, playful, free. They stayed until noses turned pink and Lily's mittens were soaked. Driving home, the truck was filled with the sound of Lily's drowsy humming and Daniel's quiet chatter about forts and astronauts. Michael thought, this is what stability looks like. This is what family feels like. Sunday evening, while Lily napped, Daniel wandered into the garage. Michael followed, finding him standing by the old tarp-covered boxes Michael hadn't touched in years. What's in there? Daniel asked. Michael hesitated, then pulled the tarp back. Inside were Sophie's old toys, clothes, and the wrapped gifts he hadn't given away. His chest tightened. These belong to my daughter, he said softly. Her name was Sophie. Daniel studied the items with solemn curiosity. Do you miss her? Every day, Michael admitted. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, Sometimes I miss Mom like that too. Michael's throat ached. He crouched, resting a hand gently on the boy's shoulder. It never goes away. But loving someone new doesn't mean you forget the ones you lost. Your mom, Sophie, they're part of our story now. All of us. Daniel nodded slowly, his eyes shining with a mix of sadness and understanding. For the first time, he leaned into Michael's chest, letting himself be held. And in that quiet garage, surrounded by boxes of memories, Michael knew they were healing each other. The week moved quickly. On Wednesday, Karen returned. She sat at the kitchen table while Michael served spaghetti, watching as Lily chattered about preschool crafts, and Daniel carefully recited a line from his reading book. After dinner, Karen pulled Michael aside. "They're thriving," she admitted, "but you need to be prepared. The board could still decide against you." Michael met her gaze steady. "Then I'll fight harder." That night, storms rattled the windows. Lily woke crying, and Daniel crawled into her bed to comfort her. Michael found them curled together, hands clasped, whispering promises of never letting go. He sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing Lily's hair, and whispered his own promise into the dark. "You're mine now, and I won't let anyone take you away." On Friday morning, as he walked Daniel to the community center, the boy stopped suddenly, tugging at his hand. "What's wrong, buddy?" Michael asked. Daniel looked up, serious as ever. "Even if they make us leave, you'll still be our dad, right?" Michael knelt, heart pounding. "Always, no matter what happens, I'll always be your dad." For the first time, Daniel's guarded expression broke. He threw his arms around Michael's neck, clinging tight. Michael held him close, whispering fiercely, "They won't take you. I won't let them." And in that embrace, under the pale winter sky, Michael's resolve hardened into steel. He wasn't just fighting paperwork. He was fighting for his children. The morning of the CPS board review arrived with skies the color of steel. Michael barely touched his coffee, his hands restless as he packed Lily's small backpack with crayons and a snack, even though he knew she wouldn't need them. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, unusually quiet, tracing shapes on the wood with his finger. "You nervous, buddy?" Michael asked gently. Daniel shrugged, his jaw set in that too-grown way of his. "If they ask me questions, I'll tell them the truth." Michael's chest tightened. That's what scared him. Children's truths were raw, unpolished. Daniel might say too much, about the nightmares, about the fear of being bad, and the board might twist it. He reached across the table, covering Daniel's hand with his own. "Just be yourself. That's all you need to do." Daniel looked up, his brown eyes steady. "And you'll be there?" "Every second," Michael promised. The county building was stark and bureaucratic. Beige walls, flickering fluorescent lights, the faint smell of disinfectant. Michael carried Lily on his hip while Daniel walked close at his side, gripping the strap of Michael's coat. Karen Douglas met them in the hallway, clipboard in hand. "The board is ready," she said softly. Then she crouched, speaking to Daniel and Lily. "You can stay with me while the adults talk. I have coloring books." Lily perked up at the mention of crayons, but Daniel's hand tightened on Michael's sleeve. "I don't want him to go without me." Michael knelt, heart aching. "I have to talk to them, buddy, but I'll come back as soon as it's over. You watch out for your sister, okay?" Daniel's chin lifted with reluctant bravery. "Okay." Inside the boardroom, 4 officials sat behind a long table, papers stacked neatly in front of them. Their expressions were professional, unreadable. Michael felt like he was on trial. The chairwoman, a woman with silver hair and sharp glasses, began. "Mr. Brennan, thank you for being here. We've reviewed your file. Before we make a decision, we'd like to hear from you directly. Why do you believe you should keep guardianship of Daniel and Lily?" Michael took a breath, his palms damp. He thought of scripted answers, about stability, finances, his foster certification. But then he pictured Daniel asking, "Would you fight for us?" And Lily whispering, "Daddy?" So he spoke from the heart. "Because they're not just children in need of placement. They're my family now. I found them abandoned in a snowstorm. They were cold, hungry, terrified. No 5-year-old should be responsible for keeping his little sister alive. But Daniel was. And Lily," his voice caught. "Lily thought no one wanted them because they were bad." He steadied himself. "No child should believe that. In the weeks they've been with me, I've watched them laugh again, sleep through the night. Daniel reads books at the table. Lily sings while she draws. This house, my house, it's not silent anymore. They belong there, and I belong to them." The room was quiet, the officials scribbling notes. One man cleared his throat. Mr. Brennan, you've suffered significant personal loss. How do you know this isn't an attempt to replace your late daughter? Michael's chest constricted. He forced himself to meet the man's gaze. No one could ever replace Sophie. My daughter will always have her place in my heart, but grief doesn't mean you stop loving. If anything, it teaches you how much love matters. Daniel and Lily aren't filling a void. They're creating something new, and I'm choosing them, just like they chose me. The chairwoman leaned forward. You understand this is permanent? Adoption is not a temporary act of kindness. It's a lifetime. Michael nodded firmly. That's exactly why I'm here, to give them a lifetime. Outside in the waiting area, Daniel sat stiffly beside Karen, holding Lily's hand while she scribbled in a coloring book. When Michael emerged, the boy's eyes shot up, searching his face. Well, Daniel whispered. Michael knelt, pulling both kids into his arms. I told them the truth, that you belong with me. Daniel clung tighter, whispering, I hope they believe you. The board deliberated for what felt like hours. Michael paced the hallway, nerves gnawing. Lily eventually curled up on a chair, asleep with her thumb in her mouth. Daniel stayed awake, watching Michael with solemn eyes as if measuring whether his protector could really win this battle. When Karen finally returned, her expression was neutral. The board has made their preliminary decision. They'll allow the children to stay with you, for now, pending final review in 6 months. Michael's knees nearly gave out with relief. He looked at Daniel, who whispered, So we don't have to leave? Not today, Michael said softly. Not tomorrow. You're staying. Lily stirred, murmuring, Home? Michael kissed the top of her head. Yes, sweetheart, home. Back at the house, the tension broke in unexpected ways. Daniel actually laughed, a real, carefree laugh, when Lily tried to wear Michael's boots and clomped around the living room like a clown. They ate spaghetti at the kitchen table, Daniel insisting on extra cheese, Lily smearing sauce across her cheeks. That night, after tucking them in, Michael lingered by the doorway. Daniel looked up, eyes brighter than usual. Did they say we could call you Dad now? Michael's throat tightened. He crossed the room, kneeling beside the bed. You can call me whatever feels right, but if you want to, I'd be honored. Daniel's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. Dad! He said it quietly, but it was there. Real. Deliberate. Lily, half asleep, echoed, Daddy! Tears blurred Michael's vision. He pulled the blanket higher around them, his voice thick. Sleep tight, my kids. Later, sitting alone in the living room, Michael stared at the tree still standing in the corner. Its lights dim but steady. For years, Christmas had been nothing but a reminder of what he'd lost. Now it marked the night he'd found something too precious to lose. The fight wasn't over. 6 months of scrutiny lay ahead. But as he listened to the quiet rhythm of 2 children breathing upstairs, Michael knew one thing for certain. He wasn't just fighting for them, he was fighting with them. Together, they were already a family. Winter slowly melted into spring, and with each passing day, Michael saw pieces of the kids' fears chip away. The board had allowed them to stay, but the 6-month review loomed like a shadow in the distance. For now, though, Michael focused on building something real, something lasting. Every morning began the same. Daniel padding into the kitchen in his pajamas, hair sticking up like a wild halo, asking if they could make pancakes. Lily followed minutes later, dragging her bear across the floor, eyes still heavy with sleep. Michael flipped batter on the griddle, marveling at how quickly routine had woven itself into their lives. For years, breakfast had been a silent bowl of cereal eaten over the sink. Now it was laughter, spilled syrup, and Lily's dramatic complaints about not enough chocolate chips. The kitchen was alive again, and so was he. One Saturday afternoon, Michael took them to the park. The grass was still damp from melting snow, but the playground buzzed with kids. Lily ran straight to the swings, her giggles carrying across the field. Daniel hung back, watching carefully, his small hands clenched. Michael crouched beside him. What's wrong, buddy? Daniel shrugged, eyes scanning the crowd. What if the other kids don't want me to play? Michael's chest tightened. You're a good kid. If someone doesn't want to play with you, that's their loss. Daniel hesitated, then finally climbed the jungle gym. Minutes later, he was laughing, chasing other kids in a game of tag. Michael sat on a bench, watching, pride swelling. Lily ran to him, breathless, pointing at her brother. Look, he's fast like a superhero. Michael chuckled, scooping her up. He sure is. For the first time, Daniel wasn't the boy guarding his sister with solemn eyes. He was just a kid, running free. That evening, they returned home tired and hungry. Michael grilled burgers in the backyard, letting Daniel help flip patties while Lily set the table with mismatched plastic cups. The smell of smoke and sizzling meat drifted through the air, mingling with the sound of crickets. As they ate under the fading sunset, Lily announced proudly, "This is our family dinner." Daniel looked at Michael cautious, as if waiting for correction. But Michael smiled, lifting his glass of lemonade. "That's right, our family dinner." Daniel's shoulders relaxed. He raised his glass too. For a moment, it felt like a sacred ritual. Still, shadows lingered. Some nights Lily woke crying, begging Michael not to let the lady with the clipboard take them away. Daniel had nightmares too, though he hid them better, curling into a ball on the bed until Michael found him. Each time, Michael soothed them with the same steady words. "You're safe. You're home. I'm not going anywhere." But privately, doubt gnawed. What if the board changed their minds? What if his past, his grief, his solitude, was used against him? To fight that fear, Michael threw himself into proving stability. He renovated the upstairs bathroom, painted the peeling porch, filed every piece of paperwork on time. He even joined a local parenting group, sitting awkwardly among moms swapping snack recipes, determined to show CPS he wasn't just trying, he was thriving. In March, Daniel's teacher sent home a note. Daniel read aloud in class today for the first time. Confidence growing daily. Michael held the note like a trophy. That night, he taped it to the fridge beside Lily's latest drawing of their house. 3 stick figures holding hands under a giant sun. Written in shaky letters at the bottom, "Me, Lily, Daddy." Michael stood staring at it long after the kids were asleep, his throat tight. Easter brought another milestone. At the church egg hunt, Lily darted through the grass in a bright yellow dress, squealing every time she found a plastic egg. Daniel stayed close at first, wary, until Michael nudged him gently. "Go on, buddy, have fun." Slowly, Daniel joined the other kids, and by the end, he was grinning ear to ear, his basket overflowing. When the pastor called families forward for a blessing, Lily tugged Michael's hand. "Come on, Daddy." Standing there with both kids holding on to him, Michael felt the weight of eyes on them. Neighbors, friends, people who had whispered about his grief for years. But this time, he didn't shrink. He stood tall, their little hands anchored in his, proud. That night, after bedtime stories, Daniel lingered at the doorway. "Dad?" he asked quietly. Michael looked up, startled by the word. Daniel had said it once before, tentative, but now it rolled off his tongue naturally, certain. "Yeah, buddy." Daniel's face was serious. "You promise, even if they say no, you'll still fight for us?" Michael crossed the room, kneeling until they were eye to eye. "With everything I have, you're my kids. Nothing changes that." Daniel nodded, satisfied. He climbed into bed, finally letting go of a breath he'd been holding for weeks. Spring stretched into early summer. The backyard came alive with fireflies, and Lily squealed every evening as she tried to catch them. Daniel started asking Michael questions about baseball, and Michael found himself digging his old mitt from the garage. They played catch in the yard, the smell of cut grass hanging heavy in the air. Daniel's throws were clumsy at first, but he improved quickly, his face glowing each time Michael praised him. "You've got a good arm," Michael said, tossing the ball back. Daniel grinned. "Think I could be on a team?" Michael swallowed the lump in his throat. "I think you could be anything you want." One night in June, after tucking the kids in, Michael sat on the porch listening to the crickets. Karen called with an update. The final review would be in July. His chest tightened, but instead of fear, he felt resolve. This wasn't just about passing inspections anymore. It was about protecting the family they had built. Messy, imperfect, but real. Inside, Lily stirred in her sleep, mumbling, "Daddy." Daniel murmured something about home. Michael leaned back, staring at the stars. For the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. He felt anchored by 2 small voices upstairs, by the promise he'd made, by the family he was determined to keep. And as the summer air wrapped around him, Michael whispered into the night, "We're almost there. I won't let anyone take you from me." July came heavy with heat and nerves. Fireflies blinked over the backyard each night, and Lily chased them with squeals of delight while Daniel practiced throwing a baseball against the fence. On the surface, it looked like any other summer in Millbrook. But inside Michael's chest, tension coiled tighter each day. The final CPS review was scheduled for the end of the month. 6 months of inspections, paperwork, home visits, and evaluations had led to this. It would decide whether Daniel and Lily could stay or whether the system would take them away. Michael didn't let the kids see his fear. To them, life continued with pancakes, bedtime stories, and weekend trips to the park. But when they were asleep, he sat on the porch with sweaty palms and restless thoughts, whispering to Catherine and Sophie's memory, "Give me strength. Help me keep them." The morning of the review, Michael dressed in his best shirt, the one Catherine used to say made him look dependable. Daniel wore a collared polo that Mrs. Henderson, their neighbor, had given him. Lily insisted on her yellow sundress, twirling for Michael until he smiled through the lump in his throat. "You look perfect," he told her. "Like a princess, she asked. "The bravest princess I know," he said. Daniel stood straighter, taking her hand. "Come on, Lily, we're ready." Michael thought, God, they shouldn't have to be brave for this. They should just get to be kids. The boardroom was the same sterile beige as before, the same long table, the same officials with unreadable expressions. Karen Douglas sat to the side, offering Michael a small, encouraging nod. The chairwoman spoke. "Mr. Brennan, we've observed your guardianship for 6 months. This is the final review to determine long-term placement. We'll hear your statement, then deliberate." Michael's palms sweated. He thought of all the arguments he'd rehearsed: financial stability, safe home environment, foster certification. But when he looked at Daniel and Lily, sitting together in small chairs, Daniel's hand protectively covering his sister's, those words felt hollow. So he spoke from the heart. "These kids came into my life on Christmas Eve, in the middle of a snowstorm. They were freezing, abandoned, terrified. Daniel was only 5, but he was holding on to his sister with everything he had, like he was the only thing standing between her and the world. And Lily thought nobody wanted them because they were bad." He swallowed hard, his voice thick. "No child should ever believe they're unwanted. In these months, I've watched them laugh again. I've watched Daniel run on the playground instead of standing guard. I've heard Lily sing while she colors, believing in joy again. My house, once silent with grief, is alive because of them." He looked directly at the board. "I lost my wife and daughter 3 years ago. That pain will always be with me. But Daniel and Lily didn't replace them. They gave me a new reason to live. And I've given them stability, love, and a promise. They will never be abandoned again. I'm not just asking to be their guardian. I'm asking to be their father." The room was silent. The chairwoman adjusted her glasses. "Thank you, Mr. Brennan. We'll deliberate." Outside in the hallway, the wait was excruciating. Lily sat in Michael's lap, sucking her thumb, while Daniel paced like a miniature adult, his brows furrowed. "What if they say no?" Daniel asked suddenly, his voice tight. Michael knelt, gripping his shoulders. "Then I fight harder. But no matter what they say, I am your dad. That doesn't change." Daniel stared at him, then whispered, "I believe you." Minutes stretched into hours. Finally, Karen emerged, her expression soft. "They're ready for you." Michael's heart pounded as they walked back in. The chairwoman cleared her throat. "Mr. Brennan, after reviewing your file, your home, and your testimony, the board has reached a unanimous decision." She paused, letting the weight settle. "Daniel and Lily Brennan are hereby placed with you for permanent adoption, effective immediately." For a moment, the words didn't register. Then Daniel gasped, turning to Michael with wide eyes. Lily clapped her hands, squealing, "Forever, Daddy!" Michael's vision blurred. He pulled them both into his arms, whispering, "You're mine, for good, forever." The drive home was quiet, but the silence was different, soft, full, almost holy. Daniel stared out the window, lips twitching like he wanted to smile but wasn't sure how. Lily hummed to herself, hugging her bear. Back at the house, neighbors gathered in the yard. Mrs. Henderson brought cupcakes. The pastor stopped by with congratulations. The kids darted between adults, basking in the warmth of belonging. Michael stood on the porch, overwhelmed. For so long, this house had been a monument to loss. Today, it was a monument to love. That night, after the kids fell asleep, Michael wandered into Sophie's old room. The walls were now covered in new drawings. Daniel's rockets, Lily's sons, both stick figures holding hands with a taller one labeled Dad. Sophie's teddy bear sat proudly on Lily's pillow. Michael sat in the chair by the window. the same one he had occupied so many nights in grief. But tonight, his heart was full. He whispered into the dark, "Catherine, Sophie, thank you for guiding them to me. Thank you for making me a father again." In the weeks that followed, life settled into something beautiful. School runs, baseball practice, dance recitals, bedtime chaos. Daniel grew taller, his laughter easier. Lily blossomed with mischief, always testing limits but running back into Michael's arms for reassurance. Everywhere he went, people smiled when they saw them together. A single dad and his two kids, not by blood but by choice, by love. And for Michael, that was everything. On a warm summer night, the three of them sat in the backyard, roasting marshmallows over a small fire pit. Lily's face was sticky with chocolate, Daniel's hands messy with melted sugar. Michael leaned back, watching them with awe. Daniel caught his gaze. "Dad? Yeah, buddy? Do you think Sophie knows we're here?" Michael's throat tightened. He looked up at the stars glowing steady in the dark sky. "I think she does. I think she's smiling right now." Daniel nodded, satisfied. Lily snuggled against him, whispering, "Forever home." Michael wrapped his arms around them both, the fire crackling softly. For the first time in years, he wasn't just surviving, he was whole. Epilogue. As you finish this story, think about the meaning of family. Is it blood? Is it shared last names? Or is it the choice to stay, to love, to fight for one another, especially when the world has tried to tear you apart? Michael chose Daniel and Lily, and they chose him. Now I ask you, dear listener, what does family mean to you? Is it the people you were born to, or the people you hold on to when everything else falls apart?